I will argue, though, of all the players that we have listed so far, Kevin Garnett might be extremely dirty, but he's also by far the most passionate of the people we've listed so far.
I'm sure that feeds into it. And that's the one thing I was going to say about Garnett is the fact that
he wants to be the best.
I think that this is a intensity thing with him, and he goes too far. And quite frankly, he
claimed he's not dirty, which is just
ridiculous. Yeah. Well, that's a ridiculous claim because of the way that he acts and he handles himself on the court. Whether he's going to admit it or not, he gets into a situation where he's forced to back down.
The bad guys will never.
By intensity.
The bad guys will never tell you they're the bad guy. The villains always think that they're going for some greater good. So he might think that his style of play isn't dirty; it's just physical. So I mean,
I don't know.
It's a tough argument to make.
What would be considered dirty in his book? Then I can't even imagine if throwing dirty bows and hitting people below the belt isn't dirty. Then what is?
Probably jumping into the stands and fighting a fan.
That was passion.
that was fear of water.
And Garnett also, I think, barked like a dog at Jared Bayless.
All right, so we've got for round number 3, I had Mike Tyson. Tony, you had Ndamukong Suh, and Dan, you had Kevin Garnett. So now we get to our number 2. And I'm going to say my number 2 is Ndamukong Suh. So the reasons Ndamukong Suh is dirty, basically what Tony said. In addition, I think what makes this so bad is just how incredibly gifted he is. And it's crazy. He's 2010, a Defensive Rookie of the Year. He is as athletically gifted as he is dirty, and if he just didn't play with the dirtiness that he does, I mean, is there any question that this guy's a first ballot Hall of Famer based on his play so far? No, this guy is definitely going to the Hall, 100%.
Yeah, he's very talented, and he would probably be very popular if he wasn't such a dirty player.
Like Brian Urlacher.
Probably get a ton of endorsements and stuff. So he's hurting himself, like a lot of these dirty players are.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he was my idol Reggie White, but he's definitely, if he wasn't as dirty and didn't get suspended for all the things that he's done, would definitely be seen as like a Brian Urlacher type, a good workman, someone who's going to get you the production you need. So I think that I would like him a lot more. I would respect him a lot more if he wasn't a jerk. He's done things like stomping on Evan Dietrich Smith's head. His other quote-unquote highlights are kicking Matt Schaub in the groin, which Matt Schaub is another good guy. Feel bad for him. Stomping on Aaron Rodgers' legs. And you mentioned, Tony, that he had been fined 8 times. Between being fined and missing game pay for suspensions,
how much does it cost him?
$404,169.
Jesus.
Which is pennies compared to that last contract he got.
True, it's pennies, but I mean, when you add it up in NFL fines, that's
a
lot of money.
Especially because
they usually give person.
A very small fine.
That is, for the average person, between 7 and 10 years of their annual salary.
Goodness.
Before taxes are taken out.
Wow.
So he's super talented, and I think that's what makes him even more dirty, is he doesn't have to be. He chooses to be.
That's a good point. I like that point.
Okay.
So, Tony, guys got anything more to say about Ndamukong Suh? Or is this just a dead horse we've decided to stop beating?
Dead horse.
I mean, if we're going to do it like he does, then we'll just keep stepping on it, but let's move on.
Yeah.
We're better than that.
Tony, who's your number 2?
So my number 2 is actually another soccer player. It's Luis Suarez. Most people know him for his biting of a player during the 2014 World Cup. Again, I don't know why these bad things keep happening to Italy, but they do.
Well, it's because Italy...
It must just talk the most smack. That's what it is.
It must be. I mean, it very could well be. But the reason that I find him to be dirty, on top of that is this wasn't his first biting incident. He's actually had 3 prior to this. Prior to the 2014 incident, not to mention he has problems involving punching and kicking other players, showing a lack of remorse for his actions, to which point he actually received a combined 45 games since 2010 as direct consequences for his actions regarding his conduct on the field. Now, he was also accused of racially abusing Patrice Evra by calling him a racial slur that he was found guilty of actually doing and was suspended for such. And on top of that, he's also known for a 2010 World Cup quarterfinal match in which the game was tied 1-1 with Ghana, and he decided to use a free hand to stop a ball on the goal line. So not only is he going to bite you, kick you, punch you, call you something derogatory, but he hasn't ruled out cheating entirely. So if there's anybody in the game of soccer who deserves to be a dirty player and be on my list this high, it's this guy.
I mean, I remember the World Cup when it happened, and there were memes going all over Facebook about him being a vampire.
Yeah. I remember seeing videos of, like, you know, not only was that a famous incident, but as you were pointing out, it certainly wasn't his first, and nor his last. And he was stomping on people with his cleats and biting and scratching, and
he's an
had
all
a
around
cat fight with someone at some point, basically. He's childish and he's dirty, and I definitely think deserves to make the list.
Despite all this, and I'm going to contradict a lot of things that I've said earlier. Well, not contradict, go in the opposite direction. He's got one of the coolest names of all the bad guys. I like the last name Suarez. I think it's a pretty cool last name.
Fair enough.
Okay. I'll give it to you, but, you know, he's clearly doing everything to trash it.
All right, so we're done with the Suarez. Who have we got at number 2, Dan?
Surprisingly, my number 2 is Brad Marchand.
No.
He's not my number 1. He's my number 2. And that's not only because he is a number 2, as previously mentioned, but my number 1, which we'll get to. You like that one, huh?
I do. I like that.
But, you know, he definitely deserves to be on this list. He is over-the-top dirty. And Ovechkin and Crosby certainly aren't saints. I know Crosby, I think, last year speared someone, and spearing in hockey, for anyone that doesn't know listening, is a lot different than spearing in football. Spearing in hockey is what he did to Dotchin. It's using the stick and basically stabbing someone with it like a spear.
I was hoping he'd go like full Bill Goldberg, like spear, like
a spear tackle.
Yeah, wait in the corner and just spear you. I guess that's not.
No,
correct.
he's too much of a coward for that. And Crosby last year was, I think I don't even know if he got punished for it, but he speared someone in the groin as well. And Ovechkin is pretty infamous for his dirty hits. And when you're as talented of a scorer, it's usually not. You usually don't get as penalized as other people do. But Marchand is so dirty that he's still getting all these penalties, even though he, very well could be one of the next great scorers. And that's tough for me to admit because I hate the Bruins and I hate him. And if he cleaned up his play, he could be, considered one of those superstars. He could possibly get a captaincy, and instead he's spending his time slew-footing and hitting people when the puck is nowhere near him, and just doing scummy things.
That's hockey. I mean, do you think maybe his quote-unquote dirtiness is less of an issue for the NHL because it's more physical, more dangerous than a lot of the other sports? Like, in none of the other sports do you have an actual weapon as part of your uniform.
I don't know. We've talked about the issues with the Department of Player Safety, so it's not like they have a good regulating body to really address this. If they had something consistent, then I think he'd get punished even more, and there wouldn't be such, weak, inconsistent punishments, similar to, in some ways what people blame Goodell for in the NFL. I think he goes above and beyond what's acceptable, and I think he really does hurt himself and hurt his team, and I can't wait for them to get eliminated in the playoffs.
And we'll talk about that next week. So, my number 2, just to recap, I had Ndamukong Suh. Tony, your number 2 was Luis Suarez, and your number 2 was basically Marchand with honorable mentions for Sid the Kid and Alex O. So you basically combined 3 into 1.
But it's mostly
with
the
a King
movement.
Dirty.
Yeah.
With a King Dirty.
He weighs the most Keurigs for any South Park fans out there.
I was gonna make a reference to Bono earlier. I will never be number 2.
He can't be number 2 because he is a number 2.
So now we're going to reveal our number 1s, but really quickly before, are there any honorable mentions that didn't make any of our lists? I can think of one in particular, a basketball player, possibly the dirtiest college basketball player in a really long time, Grayson Allen. Grayson Allen really should be suspended for like an entire season. He got suspended earlier this year by Coach K.
Barely.
Well, yeah, it was indefinitely. His indefinite suspension lasted 3 days, a.k.a. 1 game.
Yep.
When they got absolutely demolished. I believe it was against Virginia Tech, who beat them pretty badly, and then he lifted the suspension because he needed Grayson Allen.
Yeah, and that's... I think any coach would probably do that if that was what was allowed in the major sports, and I think he should have been suspended by the NCAA and not just by Coach K. And, it just really goes to show that if you're talented, you can get away with anything, basically, and that's just a really poor message to send to these student athletes.
I do have one other, and it's a college football player. He played for Clemson. His name is Ben Boulware, a linebacker. In the game between Clemson and Louisville, any chance he got to choke any player he could get his hands on, Lamar Jackson in particular, he took. Like, it was like chokehold, like rear naked chokehold. He got Lamar Jackson in a couple times. Getting up, you gotta, if you're down, you push yourself up, but you don't have to put your hand on Lamar Jackson's head and push it down to pull yourself up. So I think he's going to be seen as a dirty player in the NFL if he even really gets to see the field. I have a feeling he's going to be drafted fairly high, and he's going to end up being like, not that his play is anything similar, but a Manti Te'o. All this hype is going to come around him, and he's just not going to cut it.
Well, hopefully if he's not dirty.
Yeah, we'll see.
I don't like dirty players. I don't know.
That's why this list exists.
Yeah.
All right, so without any further ado, we're going to list our number 1s. My number 1, and I can go on for years with how dirty this guy is. Bill Romanowski, the original Romo. So I'm just going to, list all of the bad things that he's done.
Let's go.
He's the definition of roid rage, first of all. He is one of the very few people who admitted to being a Balco client. So some of his
highlights.
Yeah, highlights, I guess, is what we're going to call it. He dislocated Shannon Sharp's elbow by hooking his arm as he was going up to catch a pass and came down on it and just completely turned it around. he spit in J.J. Stokes' face. He